Good. All right. I didn't have to do the like, hey, everybody. I'm glad just the delay and uncomfortable look made you say, oh, hey. I'm Randy. I'm the creative director here at Etsy. I just wanted to thank you all for coming tonight to the Etsy Labs. How many of you have been here before for a talk? Awesome. All right. Very good. Dawa, did you raise your hand? Oh, okay, good. All right, awesome. So you're here tonight for a Code as Craft lecture, I hope. If not, you're stuck now. Code as Craft is a blog, codeascraft.etsy.com, a lecture series, which this is one of that series. And it's really a point of view or perspective on the craftsmanship of what we do at Etsy to build products, to engineer products, and a spirit of sharing that perspective about the craftsmanship of building those things with as many people as possible. We will take questions at the end of the talk, or Dan will. So hold your questions throughout, and we'll have some time at the end. I asked if I could introduce Dan tonight because the talk he's about to give you is a remix in some way or a rehash of something he gave just a few weeks ago in San Francisco at a conference called the Warm Gun Design Conference, which is, number one, a very awesome name for a conference. Number two, a very poorly designed conference sort of experience, which is an interesting one to think about. But the subtitle of the Warm Gun Design Conference is A Conference on Measurable Design. And I went there last year and really enjoyed this, the audience of designers and developers that were there. And when I couldn't go this year and needed to recommend someone to go, I thought of Dan. Dan has had one of the most informative and refreshing perspectives on design that I've ever experienced as a product designer, not just at Etsy, but anywhere. Dan is a principal engineer here at Etsy, and he's opened our eyes to many things about the decisions we make, how we evaluate those decisions, and how we can learn from what we've done to make better decisions in the future. And so with that, I'd like to introduce Dan McKinley.
Thanks, Randy. So like Randy said, you're at Etsy. Welcome. Etsy is the world's handmade and vintage marketplace. It's a magical place where you can buy things like this handmade sampler, this vintage credenza, this underwear made out of beef jerky. And beef jerky underwear is reasonably popular, as it turns out. We're on track to sell between $800 and $900 million this year, which makes us about as big as Hot Topic, as we like to say. We had about 1.5 billion page views a month. I think it's a little bigger than that now. So we're reasonably established. And at Etsy, we love experiments and we love A/B testing. And that's mainly what I'm going to talk about tonight. So this, I'm not sure how well you can see it, but this is a internal view of one of our pages. And this gray box is listing all of the active ramp-ups and A/B tests that are running just on this one page, and it scrolls off the bottom of my screenshot. So we're pretty serious about this, and we've invested a lot in tooling to support it. This is a screenshot of our A/B analyzer made by Steve. This is a tool that we use that automatically generates a dashboard full of business metrics and stuff for every running test. This is another test. This is another tool that we built, or someone built, that tells you how long you should run an experiment to be able to notice a statistically significant result of a given magnitude. So that abstracts some gnarly statistics that you would otherwise have to do. And I'm going to call what we do continuous experimentation, just for lack of a better word, and because we put continuous on everything that we promote. And what I mean by that is that we make very small and measurable changes, and the reason that we do that is twofold. It's to stay honest, and it stops us from breaking things. So when I say that we don't want to break things, what I'm driving at is behind every Etsy shop is an actual person, and that person relies on Etsy for at least some of their income, or in some cases all of their income. So we would be remiss if we just made changes and didn't check to see if they were doing what we expected and didn't check to see if they were hurting people's businesses. And I also said that we do this to stay honest. And what I mean is that Etsy's in this peculiar, great but peculiar position in which a lot of our growth is an externality. So we have 800,000 active sellers. Thousands of them are probably, as we speak, at craft fairs right now, promoting themselves on Etsy. And this is a really powerful engine for growth, and it's great. And what it means is that no matter what we do, there will be some growth. So one thing we could do would be to push out releases, observe this growth, take credit for it, declare ourselves geniuses, and then never measure anything. But that wouldn't be very honest of us. So we have to use A/B testing to tell the difference between a good release and a bad one. We have to use testing to distinguish those two things. I don't mean to suggest that if we completely took our hands off of the wheel, that everything would be great forever. That's obviously not true. The site wouldn't stay up indefinitely. But it's more true than we would ordinarily admit. And so another reason that we measure is that as we've measured things, we've noticed that the results of measurement are often very surprising. And I'm going to give you one example. So there was this Etsy lore a number of years ago that opening up things in new tabs was awesome. Etsy employees, who are obviously power users of the site, when they're shopping on Etsy, what they do is they will search for something, open up 3 or 4 items in different tabs, compare those things, buy one of them maybe. And a lot of people thought that this would be generally useful, and maybe this is the way the default search should work. A lot of people lobbied for that, and eventually we stopped arguing about it and we just tried to do the test. So we did a test in which some group of people, when they clicked on an item in search results, would get a new tab. And as soon as we did that, we noticed that 70% more people left the site immediately upon getting a new tab. So we don't argue about that anymore. So apparently Etsy employees know how to use tabs, but my grandmother does not know how to use tabs. And another major thing we've learned from experiments, and this is going to consume the rest of the talk, is that we've noticed that the process has to adapt once you start doing them. You can't just take a waterfall model of development and bolt A/B testing onto it. You will fail. And to illustrate what I mean, I'm going to go through 2 releases that the search team did, which is a team that I work on for the most part. One was Infinite Scroll. This was a release that went very badly, and I'm going to contrast that with removing our search dropdown, which went a lot better. So Infinite Scroll. If anybody doesn't know what I mean by infinite scroll, I just mean that as you scroll down in search results, more items load into the bottom, and you never have to go to the next page or anything like that. And the reason we thought it would be a good idea to do this was I think it came out of some web lore that came from Google, which is it's not made up from Google, like it's an actual result that they got, which was that as Google increased the speed of their search results, every number that they care about got better, and we assumed that that was also true for us. So we thought it was kind of an obviously good idea, so we didn't really write a plan down, but if we had, it would have looked like this. We would do this release, we would measure how well it worked, and then it would be awesome and we'd move on. And then after having done it, that wasn't really what happened. So after we did all the work for Infinite Scroll and pushed it out, people who saw Infinite Scroll as opposed to the normal search results wound up seeing fewer items than the people who did not have Infinite Scroll. They clicked on fewer items, they added fewer items to their favorites, and they purchased fewer items from search. They didn't purchase fewer items overall. They just stopped using search as the tool they were using to find the things they were buying. So obviously we'd made search worse somehow. And our initial reaction to this was, well, there must be bugs. We must have screwed something up somewhere. And so we spent a whole lot of time, like on the order of several months, going through our data, slicing it by the browser people were using, thinking maybe, maybe there's a bug that Internet Explorer users are seeing that people in Chrome don't see. And we did find a handful of things like that, and we fixed them. We sent somebody We sent one guy to a public library in San Francisco to use a shitbox computer, and we found some things that way. And we fixed a bunch of things, but nothing really, nothing changed the overall result. And we were also in a position where even if we found a segment of users that weren't reacting well, Chrome users, if we found a bug in a specific browser, people who were using Chrome like we weren't doing a lot better anyway. So we were at an impasse, and we had changed a lot of things. It wasn't working better as we assumed it would, and we didn't know how much work was outstanding to make it better. And so we went back, we said to ourselves, well, do we really have any reason to expect that this is going to be way better if we get it to work? And we went back and we tried to validate those assumptions that we were making implicitly when we decided to do the project. So the first one was, are more items in search better? And so to test that, we did the stupidest possible test of this, which is adding more items to search results. And that, and the answer for that turned out to be like barely, maybe. If you squint at it, you might see a difference in that slightly more people will succeed in getting to a listing, but there's no difference in the number of people who are buying. So people who are buying aren't sensitive to this. Then the second premise was faster is assumed to be better, and we tested that by artificially making search slower. And the answer to that is that had no effect on purchases either. So people who are buying, I mean, obviously if you make the pages slow enough, that devolves to them not coming back at all and the site doesn't work. So there's some limit, but within reason, people buying aren't very sensitive to how fast search is. So we were at this point where our premises didn't really seem to be true. And we had done all this work, and we had an infinite amount of work in front of us, and so we just took infinite scroll out back and we shot it. And so if you go back and look at our release plan, which we didn't actually write down, there are a couple of problems with it. It involved a lot of work up front, and all of that work was pointless. So a better way to have gone about this would have been to do those two experiments that I just talked about ahead of time, and then, given the results of those experiments, decide to go ahead with infinite scroll, which is hard, or just to give up and not do it. And I think that if we had done that, we probably would have not prioritized infinite scroll the way we did. And I want to say that throwing out work, as we had to do in that situation, is really hard. I think it's something that a lot of people are not predisposed to do. Humans aren't very rational when they're in the face of sunk costs. So if you work on something for many months, your natural behavior will be to continue to work on it and bang on it until it works, even if it makes no sense for you to do that. And you really have to be honest with yourself to be able to throw stuff out, and it hurts a lot when you do. And I don't want anybody to walk away thinking that infinite scroll is stupid. That's not the case necessarily. It may be stupid in a lot of contexts, but not all of them. And we just didn't do our necessary homework to make sure that it was going to make sense for our site. So, okay, that was a bad release. And I want to talk about one that went a lot better, and that was removing our search dropdown. So 5 years ago, we added this dropdown to the top of Etsy. It was used to slice search results by the kind of item, so between handmade and vintage items and so on. It wasn't intended to be permanent, but as these things always do, it became extremely permanent and accrued more and more things that this thing could do. And everybody hated it and wanted to get rid of it, but it seemed like an insurmountable task to get rid of it. So this time we actually did write down a project plan here. And that plan we were chastened by our experience with infinite scroll, doing a lot of work up front. So what we did was we divided this into smaller pieces. Each one of these was intended to be a very short cycle, like on the order of a week or two. These things could be done in parallel to some extent. Every single thing could be measurable, and they were all isolated from each other. And every step along the way was an opportunity to get feedback from the outside world and actually validate that what we were doing was right. And again, it wasn't that the overall goal was not ambitious. It was ambitious, but we just divided everything into smaller pieces. So the first thing we had to do here was attack the original the original reason for this thing existing, which was slicing the marketplace by the item type. And the hypothesis we were working from is that most people had no idea that it would do this. So the first thing we tried was we redesigned the left-hand side of search results in Etsy. We made the item facets a little larger. We made them look nicer. And this was, it's a visual improvement over what was there. It certainly didn't make anything worse, but it didn't really make anything better. It didn't cause more people to realize that vintage items existed and search for them. So from there, we changed our Autosuggest so that as you were typing something, it would slice the marketplace for you. And if you type out scarf, it will say, oh, do you want a vintage scarf or do you want a handmade scarf? We happen to have both. And this was successful to the tune of increasing sales of vintage items by almost 4%. So it was working. People were not realizing that we had vintage items, and now they do. That's a great thing to be able to tell our sellers. Whether or not they believe it is a different matter altogether. So the other thing this dropdown did was it was context sensitive, and we thought that was pretty stupid. So as you navigated around the site, what the dropdown would search over, what the search bar at the top of the site would search over changed. So if you went to a shop, you would only be searching within the shop. And again, we were thinking most people don't realize that this is what's happening. And if they search there, they're not going to get many results, and they're going to be confused and leave. So to attack this, we added the secondary search bar to shop pages that only search within the shop. It says search within the shop inside of it. And this was a lot more successful in that the people who wanted to do this could find it, and they were less confused. We also did the same thing on our item page. We added this secondary bar that searched only within the shop there. And this was actually not a success in the sense that absolutely nobody used it, and it just added clutter to the site. And if we had done, this is one of those things where if we had done the drop-down release like as a big release, we never would have noticed that this detail didn't work out. We would have just left that there forever. Another thing the drop-down could do was search over shops. Nobody used this other than sellers looking for themselves. So to address this, we changed our item search results so that if you typed in something that we thought really looked like a shop name, we would suggest the shop. This was successful in getting more people to actually use shop search. And we did 5 or 10 things like that, all about the same size. And at the end, we could remove the search dropdown. And we use data at every single step. And I just want to contrast the two release plans. With Infinite Scroll, we did a ton of design work, development work, and then a ton of measurement work. Maybe to be more accurate, the measurement bar should extend out here, but I ran out of space. And in the end, we had to throw out all of that work. With the drop-down redesign, we did little bits of design, little bits of development, and little bits of measurement. A lot of the steps worked out. A bunch of them didn't. But when something didn't work out, we didn't have to throw out all of our forward progress. And so I want to leave you with some advice, and that's to experiment with minimal versions of your idea. So in the Infinite Scroll release, we should have done the simplest thing possible to validate that the premises we were working from were actually true. We didn't do that. You should plan on not being right a lot of the time, because your intuition about how your website works is not going to be completely in line with reality. You should prefer incremental redesigns over giant site-wide redesigns all at once. I don't mean to suggest that you can always do that, or that always makes a ton of sense. Occasionally, there will be releases that can only be done as big releases. But if you're playing that card all the time, you're probably doing something wrong. Thanks. Can take questions if there are.
Have you considered whether maybe there's something about Infinite Scroll inherently that for some reason, I think it's a great idea, but for some reason bothered people, that it wasn't a matter of, oh, there's more results, but somehow they found it intimidating or something like that.
I mean,
way of researching that stuff.
that was essentially like what we would need to figure out in order to release it. Like we were at a point where it wasn't working, and we would have to say, we would have to remove or add certain aspects of it to figure that out. I mean, we threw a lot of stuff out there, but like it would all be speculation because we didn't really do that work. So I could say what I think, but I would be making it up. I don't know. Maybe Frank wants to say something. Maybe Frank has a. Maybe Frank, the product manager on this, whose face I stole. Right. Removing the item count has shown. Remains a mystery.
So over the time where you were doing all the measurement with increment scroll, and you were like changing a lot of things, were you still running the control group?
Yeah. Right. So everything that I talked about would be an A/B test where the control group is unchanged, and then some other group sees the difference.
Why did you decide to build your own A/B test platform? How long did it take, and do you think any new kind of upstart A/B test platforms would be just as good if you were doing it now?
I mean, the main reason is that our volume would overwhelm most of the ones that exist. And this is derived from our raw web logs, and in that sense is better. It took a long-ass time. If you're starting from scratch, if you're starting a startup now, like that shouldn't be what you do for your first 6 months. So definitely use one that exists. Go ahead.
The measures that you're looking at, are they the same for any change you make, or do you have to get new data points to decide if a change works?
So any test that we do, we try to write down ahead of time what we think it's going to change, and then try to only look at those things. Or at least only first look at, we're only human, but whatever. So we measure things at 95% confidence, which means that 1 in 20 things will show a significant change in error. So we don't just look at every single stat we have and see which ones are different. We say this change should increase purchases and people adding to their cart, and more people should get to the view listing page. And then either that's true or it's not, and try to work from.
Building on that question, just from a mechanical standpoint, so you've done a series of tests and you've collected similar but not entirely identical data, right, from each of the changes and what kinds of things change.
Right. So
what are you doing just for yourself to visualize, to see your results? Do you have some kind of tabulation you do for the experiment?
Yeah, so I mean 80%, if I can find it. I'd say 80% of what we do is covered by this tool. It's at the beginning. This guy. I'd say this covers about 80% of our use cases. This will, for 100 different metrics, which you pick in this box, it will show you what the change is against the control. And that answers a lot of questions, but not every single one. And for that, we do a lot of ad hoc analysis. So we'll write Hadoop jobs to look at the change in a specific thing.
And if you just personally, you like a graph like that, or you like to see stacks of numbers, or try to get a lot of data?
Yes, well, the graphs are handy for that. But one thing the graph can tell you is, I mean, it's not bulletproof, but over time, this is a very clear result in that it's a very clear result. A lot of them will look like noise and turn out to be noise. And so you can get a sense for whether or not, if you're seeing a statistically significant change, whether it's by chance or not. And I don't know, maybe Steve might want to yell at me for saying that or something, but okay. So we need to distinguish things that we ramp up, which oftentimes are operational. So we're turning on, I I don't know, turning on a new database query or something, we'll do that in small incremental ramp-ups. For A/B tests, we don't usually do that, and we do care about how much data we're getting, so that we need to at least, back of the envelope, figure out like what percentage we have to run this at in order to see a statistically significant result within a reasonable amount of time. And that kind of varies by page. So if we run a test on the search page, we could notice a 1% change in purchases because there's a lot of search traffic, given like a 5% test within a week or two. That's not true on like pages that only a few thousand people a day see. And on those pages, we would have to run a 50-50 test or something more like that.
How often does it happen that a one-off experiment fails in validating your hypothesis with the combination of validates?
So I think you're asking like how often do we take tactical steps backwards in order to get somewhere that we think will be better? Or I'm not sure.
So you run an experiment, right? And you have a hypothesis for it.
Yep.
This experiment fails in sort of validating that.
Yep.
But potentially it could be a combination of a few of these would validate that hypothesis. Is that ever the case? Like for
So
instance, you add a second search bar.
Yeah.
Removing the actual drop-down menu may prove your hypothesis right. Does that ever happen?
Okay, so I guess I'm not sure I'm getting what you're asking, but
Multivariate is looking for multivariate. Removing and adding.
yeah. So I mean, we would consider that to be the change and test that, or we would do one after the other, but measure the same metrics we did in the original tests, because they would go back down. Or I don't know. I'm not. We can talk later.
How do you decide who you love it? Is it purely random? Do you like new users?
As random, we'll occasionally segment things and say, this is looking worse, but is that because it's dominated by sellers who are experienced and used to the old way? And we'll look at stuff like that, but the assignment into the test is always random as we can make it. Back there.
Is there a reason why you wouldn't have every test at 50-50 and just finish your test in an hour a day? Are you looking for distribution of, avoiding distribution of users on Monday nights on 3 different?
Mainly because we don't want, when something's at 50%, it's essentially released. And like we have to say something about it. And if something's at a much smaller percentage of users, there's a significantly smaller chance that it will be on CNN because of that.
What about the mobile applications? Do you do the meeting experiment?
We've done a handful of tests that touch mobile web pages. To my best of my knowledge, we haven't really done any testing on iPhone client or anything like that. Although, love to figure that out.
Do you balance your quantitative research as well?
Put somebody in. Yeah, we do. That's done. That's not necessarily something I'm super involved in, but it does happen.
Is it as frequent?
Maybe a product person can say something about it. Not as frequent. I mean, we're running hundreds of experiments. We don't have hundreds of people coming in or we're not using usertesting.com hundreds of times a week. So we probably do more of this.
What's the longest test you ever ran?
The technically correct answer is we have a test that does absolutely nothing, and we do it as a sanity check. So that's been running for like a year.
On average, what's the time span for a test?
A week to a month or somewhere around there. It depends. Like on some pages, you have no choice other than to run a test for over a month to get enough data. Anybody else?
Well, someone asked about actual bringing in subjects testing. What about surveys and that kind of stuff? I haven't seen much of that. Does Etsy do that kind of market research?
It is done. I don't know. I mean, it is done. But those are quite open to selection bias, obviously. So They are a data point, but they don't, in and of themselves, they don't necessarily make a case for doing something. We have to go back and then see if that, like whatever is identified in the survey as a problem is an actual problem that affects a wide number of people, or did the people who experienced that problem all rush to the survey to respond to it?
Did you get surprised a lot by the results you get?
Surprised a lot by I'm sorry.
By the results you get?
From surveys, like that's not something I'm really involved.
Surveys by A/B testing.
I think the most surprising thing is how little effect most things have. So we make changes all the time that, you know, we believe in, that we feel are going to have earth-shattering changes, and most, yeah. It's very easy to make things worse, and we do that all the time. I'd say the most pronounced segmentation is sellers and non-sellers, because sellers are just a completely different constituency. I'm not aware of anything that split up geographically like that. We have looked at it. I can't remember any specific examples, though.
Do you ever overrule and implement a design change despite what the data tells you?
Yeah, so we use the data to make the decisions, but the data doesn't make the decision for us. And we will say, as long as this isn't 1% or more worse, like we're gonna go with it because this is the direction we're gonna take it strategically.
What's the largest kind of delta you've taken?
I don't know, maybe like nothing like that in terms of purchases. But you know, like 3% fewer within this funnel, 3% of people fewer get to an item page or something like that. Some kind of tolerance around there.
When you have a change and making a simple experiment, really feels like one of them is actually much worse. So if you wanted to take them to a different page when they click on something, that page doesn't have all the content you think it has. Do you then just bump that as to a big experiment you need to do, or are there like ways that you can sort of compromise with the fact that you know that one of them is potentially better, but initially without more work going to be worse?
So essentially, we're trying like the minimum version of something, and like it doesn't look promising.
How do you define that?
That's the rub, I guess. That is the hardest thing to do. We try really hard to come up with. I'm trying to think of specific examples. Maybe someone can help.
It's easier in mobile. I think it might be.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, like, yes, the danger exists that the minimum version of your idea is too minimum. I will acknowledge that as a pitfall, but I don't have a great answer.
Are you going to come with tests or when conflicting with each other?
So if we think that tests are going to conflict with each other and we try to keep track of which tests are running, we will then turn those into tests that have many different groups. So if like test A and test B each have like a control and a treatment group, and we think that those would conflict in a bad way, we would turn that into one test that has four groups, and do it that way. We think that that's rarely the case, and the way most of the math works out is that the assignment being random, number of people who are in any given bucket is kind of small.
You would go back and revalidate successful tests several months later.
We have a couple of times. We have one specifically I can think of. Well, we've done the new window experiment at least 2 or 3 times, I think, in different contexts, and it's always bad. Another one was, I'm not sure if I should say this out loud, but removing tags from ranking. Removing consideration of item tags from ranking has consistently shown improvement. And we've done that again to just make sure it was still true, because that would be a big change for sellers, and we really want to be sure about it in order to do it.
In terms of like, I don't know, getting buy-in for this philosophy from find that like that's just inherent to people that you hire at Etsy and all product designers are on board with it, or is it like difficult sometimes to convince people that like that this is going to weigh significantly in decisions?
Everybody that we have, I think, buys into it. There's an education hurdle, obviously, involved in getting people using the right methodology, and it's not easy. And like, I've been here for 5 years, and we've only barely, I think, gotten to a good place, or we've gotten on the right path. But I think everybody, at least wants to do stuff and prove that it was good, and that's what we're trying to do. So our mobile app is in its infancy, and we've only barely figured out how to instrument it, and not necessarily very well. So we're not doing a lot of testing on that. Mobile web pages we have tried, but and we will need to do a lot more since it's a significant amount of traffic. But we haven't done a ton of things only related to mobile. Mobile web would look a lot like this, I think.
You mentioned you work with search most of the time, and I guess my question is structural. I mean, when you're putting a test in place, is it only the search team that needs to make changes, or is there a search team and a front-end component change, and changes among multiple teams for these tests?
So I think the way our teams work most of the time is they would be making all of the changes necessary and doing the analysis as well. We do have an independent data team, but they tend to consult and help you with experimental design and stuff like that.
Can you talk a little bit more about the mechanics of recording this amount of data? I mean, you made a good question like logs, all just logging stuff, request time on server side, or any client recording data you're setting up?
The main way it works is there's a JavaScript beacon on every page that loads an image and has a lot of data about that page view. Those are just logged by Apache. So we have a cluster of beacon servers. They collect that data once a day. We run a Hadoop job that does that sessionizes it, so that we have like the stream of all the events that happened, but then we also roll those up into like the sequence of events that made up one visit, and then we run analysis from there.
Just real quick, and then so is that you can call affected dynamically by the client-side stuff?
Yeah,
like
right. So like 2% of them get dropped, and that's just the way it is. We assume that that's relatively fair.
So even the diagram with the short innovator verse.
Yep.
Can you kind of step back and talk about the structure and process across those? So how many folks can be included, and how long are they? What are the roles, responsibilities?
Let me just call up that slide real quick. I found a more efficient way to do this.
Does this go up? Is it like for 3 of these supports?
In the case of, I'm not sure if I can even find this thing. In the case of the drop-down redesign, in the case of both of these projects, we're talking about, three engineers maybe, 1 product manager. In this case, they would be working on all of those things, probably coding them in parallel, doing. I mean, in this case, there may have been a few more, just because the projects were discrete, but not many more, maybe like 5 people total. And we would be coding these things in parallel in some cases, because these are small things, and then running the tests in parallel in some cases. In that one, it was largely the effort of 1 engineer, and a bunch of other people helped, but largely 1 guy.
And then do you have designers in the mix? Is it like a designer floating across?
Yes, there are designers. We don't have that many, and we fight over them. So if you are a designer, we would love to talk to you. Anything else?
What were you doing before Etsy?
Finance, hating my life. No, I don't even know. It's like a little Bloomberg competitor. I don't know. It was terrible. Yeah. Well, there's one more. One more.
All right. Can you tell us a little bit more about how that little drop-down menu function that tells you how long to run a test for works? Because a lot of what I saw in there, like, it doesn't seem like it would have enough information to be able to tell you. Because one piece of information.
That's like, it's a wizard, and there are other steps. Maybe do you want to say anything about that?
I'd love to know more about how you figure out how long a test should be running before you.
Well, the levers you have are like how many people you show it to as a percentage, and then how long you run it, basically. And you can play with those, and then like you can calculate, and I'm not going to be able to reproduce the math up here, but calculate. So if a 1% change happened, how often would we be able to notice that? And then like you can play with these knobs to figure out like what you're willing to tolerate. So
You are giving it an expected magnitude change.
yeah, so like if something reduced purchases by 50%, you would notice that pretty fast.
Yeah.
But only rarely does that happen. All right.